Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So we're only 12 days out from the NHL draft, and I'm pumping out my scouting report, breakdown grades on certain prospects. And one aspect, if you follow me on TikTok, follow me on Instagram, you know that I give player comparisons for all of these prospects in terms of what their game looks like comparing it to an NHL player. It's not a one-to-one in terms of their skill. It's more so overall their style of hockey. What NHL players do they remind me of? So today I wanted to run through 15 of them. Yes, you've probably already seen, I think I've done like 5 or 6 of the top guys in terms of full-on breakdowns. I won't spend too much time on those guys because I hope you guys follow me on Instagram and follow me on TikTok. But we are going to go through 15 of the top prospects in this year's draft. And I'm going to tell you what NHL players I think resemble them. And again, this is more so play style, not exactly skill. I did try to kind of line it up on skill, but some of these you're going to see, some of these guys, the players that I'm comparing to them are most likely going to be, or most likely are much better than said prospect ever will turn into. So let's get into it. And then with the first one, it's definitely a case of it more so being style than a one-for-one on skill, because with Macklin Celebrini, I see Sidney Crosby, man. I see a future 80% of what Sidney Crosby is. When looking at Sidney Crosby in his game, he wasn't like a McDavid or Mario Lemieux in the sense that McDavid had a generational skating ability. Lemieux had that generational size while also having the skill. Don't get me wrong, Sidney Crosby had a shit ton of physical. He was very good in terms of physical attributes, everything at an A or A+ level, but it was more so his just high IQ in processing and overall feel for the game, overall motor that turned him into an eventual top 5 player in NHL history. And when looking at a Macklin Celebrini that's basically the same build as a Sidney Crosby, 5'11", 6 foot, already like 190 points, 190 pounds, not 190 points, but lower center of gravity, very thick legs that allow them to be fantastic skaters. I see Sidney Crosby with Macklin Celebrini when looking at them. I think they're both just everything that they do is at such a high level that although with the Macklin Celebrini, maybe you can't really see that one trait that is so A+++. That's why he's going first overall. Everything is just A or A- across the board. So I see definitely a lesser version of Sidney Crosby, but I think with the way that they play, the way that they're able to read the game and just their overall stature and size, I think that Sidney Crosby is an apt comparison in terms of overall play style to a Macklin Celebrini. Next up, Ginla. I'm going to go Travis Konecny. Ginla, I feel like people think that he's actually like a pretty big guy, like 6'1", 6'2". No, he's only like 5'11 and a half. He is not small by any means, but I think that Travis Konecny is a good comparison because even though he's not that tall, he's not the traditional 6'2", 6'3", power forward kind of build. He is not afraid to get into the greasy places like a Travis Konecny while also having a fantastic shot. I think Ginla probably is going to move over to the wing in his NHL career like a Travis Konecny, but I think Ginla has potential 30-30, 35-30. Travis Konecny last year was 30-30 in 61 games. He put up a 40-40 goddamn pace. So I see a lot of Travis Konecny with the Ginla. Not the most physically imposing guy on the outside, but is not afraid to get into the greasy spots and overall throw his body while also having a very, very good shot. Konsta Helenius, this is kind of low-hanging fruit, but I went with Mikko Koivu. I understand they're both Finnish. It's not the most deep comparison, but I do think they share a lot of stuff in terms of, again, extremely high hockey IQ, in terms of their defensive play. Their two-way play is both so fantastic. Not the most prolific shot. Mikko Koivu, I think, broke the 20-goal mark like only a couple times in his career, and I don't expect Konsta Helenius to really be a sniper in his NHL career, but just such a reliable two-way, eventual low-end, 60 to 70 point number 1 center, I think is in his future. And Selke finalists like Mikko Koivu throughout his career, I think it's a pretty solid comparison when looking at the next great, he doesn't have the offensive potential of an Alexander Barkov, but I think he does have the defensive potential of a Mikko Koivu. Becket Sennecke, not Bennett Sennecke, like I say a couple times. Becket Sennecke, I'm going with Pavel Buchnevich. This is more of an outside the box one when looking at it. Usually Canadians and Americans get compared to Canadians, Americans, Russians get compared to Russians, Finns get compared to Finns, Swedes get compared to Swedes. But I do see some Pavel Buchnevich and some Becket Sennecke. When looking at it, Sennecke obviously grew from like 5'10" to 6'3" over the past year. Pavel Buchnevich also 6'3", both very good skaters and very, very good with the puck in terms of playmaking, both right wingers, obviously. So I think at the next level, I don't think that he's going to be as good as Pavel Buchnevich, Buchnevich that over the last 3 years has been near point per game. But in terms of a playmaking, imposing guy that can move the way that Pavel Buchnevich can, I think Becket Sennecke does kind of play like a Pavel Buchnevich. Berkly Catton, this one I already did on my Instagram, and I do kind of understand there was some criticism because Logan Cooley's only 20 years old. I probably should have picked a more seasoned guy, but I think when looking at a Logan Cooley and a Berkly Catton, both are just so amazing in transition, such high-level skaters, and have such skill to create. They are undersized guys. I think Logan Cooley it was a far better prospect. He was my number one guy in 2022 that I knew that he was going to pan out. Berkly Catton, there's definitely some more concerns overall with his. I don't think he's as good as a playmaker or even has like really as good of a shot as a Logan Cooley coming out, but I still think they play a pretty similar style of hockey in terms of being dominant in transition while also having such high skill and playmaking ability with the puck. That's why I put them together as a comparison. Sam Dickinson, Noah Hanifin. I've seen this get floated out a couple times, and I definitely agree. Both 6'2", 6'3", very solid both sides of the ice. Noah Hanifin never really reached his full potential at fifth overall in terms of becoming that legit number one forward. I think Sam Dickinson definitely can. But yeah, both guys that I would bet on having very successful careers in terms of at least being top pairing defensemen. Physical, can also move the puck up the ice and skate at a pretty high level. I've seen that a lot. It's not the most original comparison, but I think it's pretty bang on in terms of their two play styles. Cole Eiserman, this got a lot of flack when I did it on Instagram, but I have Mike Hoffman. And Mike Hoffman got way too much shade. When looking at Mike Hoffman, he peaked as a guy with 36 goals, 34 assists for 70 points back in 2019. That's what's so crazy. It's not like Mike Hoffman dominated the 2010s and maybe my younger audience forgot about this. This was 5 fucking years ago. The guy put up about 35 and 35. And even beyond that, he had like 5 other seasons above 25 goals. Cole Eiserman definitely has potential to become a 40, 45 goal guy, but that's definitely not set in stone. Both fantastic shots, obviously. I would say Eiserman probably has a better shot. I wasn't around back when Mike Hoffman was coming out. I don't remember how good of a prospect he was. But when looking at it, Eiserman definitely has a better shot. But I think both of them are in the same way in terms of they're not going to give you much at the defensive end. They're not going to give you a ton playmaking. But if you pair them with a very good playmaking center like Mike Hoffman had back in Florida, and when he broke out for that 1 year, I think they can both be very, 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 very good goal-scoring top sixers, fantastic on the power play. I don't think they're ever going to be able to drive their own line, but players, goal scorers like them are so important in the game of hockey that I would use a pretty high pick on Cole Eiserman. Cayden Lindstrom, I'm going to go with Pierre-Luc Dubois, but more specifically pre-Kings Pierre-Luc Dubois, because obviously he kind of shut the bed this year. But looking at it before that, especially last year, 63 points, 73 games, and in years prior, he was a legit solid low-end first line, second line, solid power forward at 6'3", 6'4", similarly to what I think Cayden Lindstrom can turn into. He sniffed 30 goals. I think he maybe got to 30 goals one season, but was like a 30 and 30 guy around during his best years. And I think Cayden Lindstrom has potential to be even better than that, but I do think them as they have all the physical tools in the world to turn into fantastic players. Pierre-Luc Dubois, when he's actually engaged, is a fantastic player. Now, you got to get more engagement out of him. I think Cayden Lindstrom is going to be a far more engaged and overall have a higher level of compete, but I think Pierre-Luc Dubois and Cayden Lindstrom is a solid comparison. Don't shit on me. Don't mention the LA Kings Pierre-Luc Dubois. I'm talking about more so beforehand in terms of what I see. Ivan Demidov, another one that's been talked about a lot, but I do see Nikita Kucherov in terms of the fact that Demidov isn't the strongest skater, but not saying Kucherov's a bad skater. Kucherov has fantastic edges. I would not say that he's the most fastest skater, but he's definitely fantastic in terms of his overall agility. Similarly to a Demidov, not burner speed, but his overall hockey sense, playmaking, and passing is just next level. I think he's the best pure playmaker in this draft. So in looking at him, I do see shades of Kucherov. Again, never going to be a burner on the wing, but can create so much on the goddamn power play. He is going to be an absolute technician. So I think Nikita Kucherov is a solid comparison for him. Artyom Levshunov, I've also posted this one with my scouting report of him. I went with Noah Dobson, a big 6'2", 6'3" defenseman. Might take a couple years to develop. Although Levshunov was very good at the college level, I'm not sure he's immediately going to translate to the NHL like a Noah Dobson, but once he hits with that right shot, heavy guy, I think he can really hit in terms of being a legit offensive defenseman at the next level. I think Levshunov's defensive game is a little bit overrated, similarly to Noah Dobson when he came in. He wasn't quite there defensively, but when looking at it, I think that's a pretty solid comparison. Silayev, I have Islanders in Zdeno Chara, not like Boston Bruins. I know this is also an extremely basic one, considering the fact he's 6'7", but it does make sense. I'm going to go with Islanders, Zdeno Chara. I think it's stupid to compare him to Boston Bruins. Zdeno Chara, that's one of the best defensemen of all time, but in terms of just a raw prospect, doesn't really offer that much offensively, but is a physical presence on the defensive end, very solid skater. I think that's more of a Silayev overall comparison. I'm not sure his offensive game is ever going to develop like Zdeno Chara eventually did on the Senators and then really found his groove on the Boston Bruins. But I think Islanders, Zdeno Chara, although as he was very young back then, maybe a mix between Islanders and early Ottawa's Zdeno Chara is more so what I'm looking at, like a 30 to 35 point top pair defenseman, very good player in Anton Silayev. Trevor Connelly, Matt Barzal. When looking at Trevor Connelly, so much skill, very good skater. I saw someone compare him to Connor McDavid, which just in terms of skating, I think that's ridiculous. But I think Matt Barzal is a pretty solid comparison. They're around the same height. I think Connelly's maybe a little bit taller and a little bit weighs a little bit more. But when looking at it, I'm not sure Connelly's ever going to have the defensive game that Matt Barzal eventually developed. But in terms of overall playmaking and skating, I think I do see some shades of Matt Barzal. Zeev Buium, Josh Morrissey, a kind of little bit, not undersized, but only like 5'11", 6-foot defenseman, lefty, but so smooth in their own offensive zone in terms of creating plays, keeping plays alive. Zeev Buium he was just playing with defensemen or playing with college players at the blue line, just deking the shit out of them. It was very impressive. I see some Josh Morrissey in him. Stolberg. This guy is the fastest riser right now. I wanted to include him in this. But for Stolberg, I'm going to go with Martin Feravari. When looking at Martin Feravari, they're both the same build, 6'2", 205 pounds. Feravari is not afraid to throw the body, does offer some decent offense. Not really, no, he's more so of a defenseman, but I think Stolberg is similar to that. High motor, very physical guy. Martin Feravari kind of fits that mold in terms of what I think a Stolberg could turn into. I don't think that he's ever going to be a real offensive guy, but if you're looking for a good second pair defenseman down the line, I think Stolberg can eventually be that. And then lastly, we got Zayne Parekh. And again, similarly to with Celebrini, I'm not saying he's going to be as good as this guy, but I do see some Cale Makar in Zayne Parekh's overall game. Right-handed defenseman, almost exactly the same build. He's already 6 foot and like 185 pounds, a thick boy. And when looking at him overall with his skating and his fantastic shot, the dude tore it up this year in the OHL. I think some of his offensive traits do remind me of a young Cale Makar. Again, not saying he's going to turn into Cale Makar, who's the best goddamn defenseman in the entire NHL, but I definitely understand the comparisons that have been made, and I see where they're coming from in terms of the offensive side of the game. There's question marks about Zayne Parekh defensively. Do not get me wrong. I'm going to do my full breakdown on him soon, but offensively, I definitely see a Makar style of hockey, just overall navigating the blue line and not afraid to absolutely rip it. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about these comparisons? Which ones do you think are absolutely absurd? Which ones do you think I hit right on the head? And I'll be seeing the next one.